All right, it's 5:30. I know we've got our panelists here with us. It looks like we have about 47 participants all together. And at this time, Tony, I think we should go ahead and begin if you want to start by sharing the screen of the slides. I want to welcome all of our guests tonight as we talk about ARC 2.0. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping components. There is a Q&A feature on your screen. This is how you'll be able to ask us questions and we'll be able to respond to those. I am going to ask that you hold those until we are closer to the end of the information that we're sharing. A lot of times we find that what we're sharing will answer those questions, and and we can save some time for the end for the things that we may not have addressed that you specifically need to know as a family. And it looks like we've got a mute that we need to put on, but I can't do that for some external noise. All right, so Tony, if you can go to the next slide, I'll be happy to introduce our panelists tonight. So I am Tara Sparks. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the district, and we have quite a few people who are going to help us talk through what ARC 2.0 is. We have Dr. Ronnie Zagora, our Executive Director of Secondary Education.
Good evening.
Sorry, I was just moving on through that.
I was ready for your next introduction.
Doug Barton, our ARC coordinator. And then on the next slide, we have Dr. Eric Cochran, our principal at Lindbergh High School. And Dr. Jonathan Riethmeyer, one of our school counselors and also the department chair of our counseling department at the high school. And our final slide of introductions, we have Dr. Lauren Boger, principal at Spearing Middle School, and Dr. Mike Stratman, principal at Truman Middle School. So they're all going to be able to share perspective on any questions that we have related to the different needs at both the middle and the high school. And then going on to the next slide, really want to emphasize to you that what we're talking about tonight, it really is ARC 2.0. So the vision that you have, the experience that you have in ARC currently as a middle or high school student is not what we are talking about for the future. It's very important that we realize that going into next school year, we're really looking at for lack of a better word, a traditional school experience where we are expecting that our students are in person, learning a full 5 days a week, that the pandemic is not having an impact on the need to have a virtual experience. And the reason why this is really important as you are listening to tonight's slides is because we know that the vast majority of students, the virtual learning experience is not one that works for them. We have a lot of data that shows where our students are struggling, and because we've been in a pandemic, obviously we wanted to support the personal choices of families, the health and safety of individual students and their families. But as we plan for next year, that is a very different expectation. The expectation is that ARC 2.0 are for those families where virtual learning really did work well, where students excelled in a non-traditional learning environment. And so what we're going to be sharing with you tonight is what ARC 2.0 looks like as we continue to grow this program. We will be growing this over time. So what we share with you today is not a complete version of what it will be for the future, but it is what we are able to offer going into the 21-22 school year. The other thing that I think is important to make note is there are virtual offerings outside of ARC. ARC is our accelerated and remote courses, but there are also virtual opportunities that are available through a program called MOCAP, Missouri Course Access Program. And like MOCAP within ARC, the district looks at what is the data and ensures that students who are in those virtual programs have the ability to be successful. So we're going to talk about some of those elements tonight as we go through the presentation as well. Next slide, please. All right, so our table of contents. So tonight, this is our agenda for tonight. We want to talk about why we're continuing to work with development of ARC, how ARC will look next year as compared to what it is this year, and then going into those specific key differences between ARC in a pandemic and ARC 2.0. what expectations and support you can expect, because we do want to ensure that students are successful. And then what is our process and our timeline to register? We're going to focus on that component of how ARC is being designed. And then we are also in the possibility, in the current process of investigating a synchronous virtual program that I'll clarify more at the very end, because there's two definite differences between how ARC is being designed for the future. And the first one is going to focus completely on that asynchronous program development. Next slide, please. All
so
right.
why choose ARC? The first thing to start with is that your child has had success in the first version of ARC, that online learning works for them, that they are ready to learn in an independent sort of way. Some other reasons that you might choose ARC: that these courses are going to be developed and led by Lindbergh teachers who know very well what our curriculum looks like and what the experience in our classrooms look like. So you're going to have that connection, that there's a Lindbergh teacher teaching your kid asynchronously. And then there's also lots of opportunities for personalized learning. So first of all, it creates some flexibility in your schedule. There's the potential, if one of these classes is right for you, that you might be able to take it asynchronously in order to take something else during the school day. We'll talk more about the schedule in a bit. There's also the possibility to accelerate. I really like something in particular and I want to take more of it. This could be an option for you. And then finally, this is developing some great learning skills for kids that are going to help them down the road. Part of college and part of learning as an adult is being able to learn on your own. So developing success skills is going to be an important part of why you might choose ARC. Next slide. So two basic different ways that ARC could look, and this slide is really about high school in particular. We will talk more about middle school in this presentation. You could take an asynchronous course as part of your regular daily schedule. And if you did that, there would be no cost associated with it. The other option is that you might want to take an additional class, an 8th class. If you're taking an additional class, there's a fee that's associated with it, and it would be $200 a semester. Next slide. Main differences. Pandemic ARC, which is ARC this year, is full-time enrollment in the ARC program. It's synchronous learning. You have a teacher providing live instruction, and the teacher is driving the class. So they are setting the deadlines, and they're really dictating where the student is at in their learning. ARC 2.0 is going to look different. So first of all, there's going to be a limited number of course options, and you'll learn more about those in a moment. The learning is going to happen on their own. So the kid's going to learn it, what they're learning by themselves. They're going to be driving their own pace. They're going to decide when they need help, when they're ready to move on. And so that self-paced component is going to be very important. Next slide.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the different curriculum options that we'll have in ARC 2.0. And again, I want to highlight that the version of ARC we've had this year, because it's been driven by a pandemic, and we wanted to make sure that we could accommodate all of the needs of all of our students who chose a virtual option. The options were a lot more wide ranging. And as we go into next year, into our 2.0 version, we're looking really at courses where either we expect there to be a higher demand, or it makes sense based on what we've seen in the past of areas where students might want to accelerate their learning or take care of some graduation requirements outside of their traditional school day. So when we talk about these limited options, and one question you might have is, why is this all that we see right now? The future of ARC is going to really be driven by demand. So at this point, we're starting small. Because we want to do it well. And these courses take a lot of time and expertise to develop. So what we have offered this year with our pandemic version of ARC is that we have a lot of live teaching opportunities. And so our teachers are able to Zoom live with students. And in some ways, they're really replicating a classroom experience, but it's happening at home. And going into an asynchronous model means that the level of preparation for these courses is a lot more involved and a lot more robust, so that students can kind of pace themselves through it. And there's not always that live exchange, which means that on the preparation end, there's a lot of content that has to be prepared well in advance before the semester even begins. So in starting small, those are some of our objectives. But again, I'll say it's largely going to be driven by demand. So at the middle school level, we selected math as a great place to start, because what we have found is that our middle school math sequence can sometimes be too rigid for some students, where our students come up from 5th grade and they are placed into a middle school math, and then oftentimes that determines their sequence then for the next 7 years. And while we have some flexibility and a little bit of fluidity built in, it doesn't necessarily always accommodate students who at some point in middle school, they have a readiness for the next level of math, but their schedule doesn't allow for that, or the sequencing doesn't allow for that. So in developing a pre-algebra middle school ARC course, it will allow students who are ready to maybe accelerate and go to the next level of math to do that without it having to be the scheduled course that is in their school day. And the pre-algebra there is chosen because it's kind of in the middle of the math sequence for a middle school student. And we often see that that's sometimes where we see that readiness for students once they've mastered that 6th and 7th grade math. There's a readiness to move faster or to go further. And we want to make sure that we give them that opportunity. And then if we have students that are completing a pre-algebra ARC course, then we may have some that are ready for an algebra course, but it might not be the appropriate time of year for them to transition into an algebra course. So if they've done some self-paced pre-algebra and they're ready to move up to an algebra course, but it's maybe already December or January, then we would want to make sure that we can offer them an online start to an algebra course so that they can ultimately catch up to their peers before high school. And then when we look at the high school offerings, so we've selected a few courses that are graduation requirements. These are courses that are sometimes taken by students in summer school. They are courses that even prior to COVID were already in some stage of development as an online course. So the personal finance, or PFM as some call it, personal financial management, that is one we intend to offer as an ARC course. PE, health, again, all graduation requirements. And then we wanted to add a version of our English 4. And we decided to go with it. We have many iterations of English 4. Our students are required to take 4 years of English. And by the time they get to their senior year, they have a lot of choices. But the College Comp 1 and 2, this is a dual credit offering. So students who took that would be able to earn dual credit from St. Louis Community College. And it is a curriculum that lends itself better to an online or a virtual experience than some of the other English courses. And the objective here in offering an English 4 course is that we have students that by the time they get to senior year, this may be the only credit they have yet to earn to complete their graduation requirements. And they may have other plans. They may want to, do some career or technical education, or do some internships, or do a dual enrollment situation at the community college. And so we're trying to build in some flexibility there for students as well. So this is our starting point. If we see that there is a large demand for other courses, then that's something we will explore in terms of developing other courses that there's a demand for. But as I pointed out, we want to start small. We want to do it right. We want to do it well. Next slide.
In terms of student support, my name is Dr. Riethmeyer, by the way. I'm a high school counselor, but I want to talk about student support. And we'll have 3 levels of student support worked in: teacher, counselor, and then the ARC coordinator. So with the teacher, once again, it's going to be taught by a Lindbergh teacher, and they're going to have regular office hours where a student, if they're struggling or has questions, can meet with them virtually to get those answered in that type of environment where they can talk to somebody directly. In addition, the teachers are going to be the front line when it comes to defense and identifying concerns or issues. They will communicate like they do now if a student's not doing well, to the student, the parent, the counselor, so we can intervene if necessary. Then the next level of support would be the counselor. And we have grades that come out at mid-quarter, quarter, semester, that type of thing. And counselors review those and meet with students do some interventions if necessary. So that'll still remain in place and be there. And then finally, we have an art coordinator, Mr. Doug Barden, who's going to kind of overall be looking at this and checking stuff periodically. We're looking into something or investigating something called Grade Guardian, where that allows the coordinator, counselor to kind of, it's a tool that will allow or notify if there's some concerns in terms of grades or attendance or anything like that. So just another layer of support we're looking at. But the plan is to try and mimic and have similar supports that we have for our students that are live in person through the teacher, counselor, and the art coordinator. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Cochran, Lindbergh High School principal. And as the principal at the high school this past year, I've been very lucky to see firsthand some of the benefits and some of the challenges associated with virtual learning. And obviously, virtual learning brings both. And so one thing that we definitely recommend as you move into potentially exploring these opportunities in the future, which we're excited to offer, is whether or not they're right for your child. And I think it's really important that you look at these skills that are listed here on this slide: academic readiness, motivation, and certain success skills that are required in order to be successful in a program like this. And I think every student should be asking themselves, am I ready? Do I have enough background on skills and knowledge in order to be a success in a virtual environment? A motivation, do I have that motivation that's going to keep me going? Because there's going to be a lot of scenarios where that student doesn't necessarily have a teacher looking over their shoulder and encouraging them to stay on task the way they would during an in-person environment. And then the success skills, same thing. Time management, self-advocacy. A lot of our students are struggled in these areas. And I do think it's important that we take a moment to mention that virtual learning is not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be the right fit. We want to make this available for students who can benefit from this type of format. At the same time, we have to recognize that it's not going to be the right fit for all. And so doing a quick self-assessment on these types of skills is probably something that you can do to determine whether or not this is something that would benefit your family moving forward educationally. Next slide.
Doug, you're muted.
Yeah, I just figured that out. Thank you. The first thing you can do is express your interest if you are interested in ARC 2.0. So you can express interest by the end of the month, and I'm going to show you a couple slides in a moment of how you do that. The timeline to withdraw is a month. So if you start the class, if your child starts the class and figures out, yeah, this isn't the right time for me, this isn't working for me, you can withdraw within the first month and it will not affect your GPA. Some other things to know: if you choose ARC 2.0 as an extra course, meaning you're going to be paying $200 per semester, then you have a refund window that's pretty short. It's within the first 5 days of the course. Anything beyond that 5 days, there would be no refund. Next slide. Okay, so if you are interested, where you can go to register is the Lindbergh Schools website. And when you go to the website, that first page, that home page, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom and you will see a whole section of quick links. And the quick link that says virtual learning is the one that you want to click on. Next slide. And then on that next page, you're going to see 2 course request forms, one for middle school, one for high school. When you click on these, you're going to see a Google form pop up that you'll fill out. And again, you're expressing your interest. Some of the things you would express are, would you like to, which class would you like to take? Are you looking at a semester course or a year course? Which course is your interest? Also, we do have a question on there about, are you interested in full-time? So we want to gauge that interest as well. And then once you submit it, by the end of the month, we have an idea of what you're interested in. Next slide.
All right, so we've spent the majority of this presentation tonight talking about the asynchronous version of ARC 2.0, and that's really what we are very intentionally designing. However, we're also realistic that there are families who have had a lot of success, and as Dr. Cochran referenced earlier, that is not the typical experience. Virtual learning it can be a challenge for many students, but for some, it has really hit a skill set that has helped them to thrive. So one of the components that we are currently investigating is the possibility of a full synchronous opportunity for families. As you are aware, this year with ARC, we really struggled to be able to get all of our students in all of the courses and have a complete virtual experience that wasn't connected with the in-person experience. If you think about the number of courses that happen at the high school, for us to be able to create a personalized schedule that would be entirely virtual with the resources that we have and the number of students that we have as a one high school district is very challenging, and it limits our opportunities. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to, if you are interested in a synchronous virtual program for your child, to fill out the forms that Doug just referenced, because that helps us to pull in other resources. We're having conversations collaboratively with other districts around the county. We are also able to access programs through MOCAP in order to help students get access to the programs that they need. Now, not all of those are synchronous, however. Most of those MOCAP virtual programs are also asynchronous, so students are self-pacing and they don't have that direct teacher content. But this is one of those programs that it's really, it's hard for us to build it until we know what level of interest it is, and it's hard for us to say exactly what we'll be able to do. So that's where it's very helpful to us if you fill out those forms by the end of March to let us know what it is you're looking for in your child's experience next year, so that we can work with you to help create that. At this point, that's the overview of what we wanted to share with you. So now's a good time to put any questions into the Q&A if you have those for us, so that we can try to support the needs that your family has.
Dr. Sparks, there is one question in the chat that I'm happy to answer about whether an 8th grader can take virtual high school courses. So great question. We do allow that when 8th graders complete 8th grade over the summer before they enter 9th grade, we do allow them to take high school summer school courses, some of our options. Generally speaking, if an 8th grader wants to take a high school course, they would have to go through our same procedures that we would do even if it were a seated course, which is to determine whether acceleration is appropriate for the student. So we've got procedures and processes in place for that to really determine the student's readiness for the next level course. And we would, that process is led by our gifted coordinator, but we would do the same thing that we would do if it were a seated in-person course, is that we would want to make sure that it's an appropriate placement for that 8th grade student to take a high school course at that time. So it's fairly uncommon, but it's not impossible, I would say.
All right, we've got some other questions here about, is this the platform that summer school will be offered on this year? Summer school for the high school will have a mix of in-person and virtual experiences. At the middle school, we're still in the process of designing it, but again, it looks to be a mix. So we're not looking at a full virtual replacement of summer school in the way that we had last year. And we'll have more information on our summer school programming at the end of this month. I know actually high school is releasing it in the next week. Is that correct, Eric? And then
yes.
Middle school will be released at the end of this month. So we'll have all of those details ironed out for you.
I can answer the band question if you'd like. I see there's a question in here about how will band work for ARC students. Short answer is that it really won't. We have had conversations about what it would look like for potential electives in an ARC format, and there are just some that do not lend themselves to the success of the overall program or to the students. And being part of an ensemble moving forward, we think that it's going to be important for the sake of that ensemble, whether it be choir, orchestra, or band, that those students be present for that class.
There's also the question about examples of extra courses that will be offered. So the ARC courses that we referenced, personal finance, health, PE, and composition 1 and 2, those would also be extra courses. So a student could take those within their regularly scheduled day, but have that just as a virtual replacement, or it could be an additional course that is taken.
I can address the question about the math sequence. So if a student wanted to accelerate, a middle school student accelerate their math sequence, it's probably really going to be situational. I would say it probably the best scenario would be to maybe experiment with the student staying in the course that they're assigned to, but maybe trying some of those modules from the next level course. We want to keep the flexibility open that if it is too much of a challenge, that student can fall back into the course that they're in. But the whole purpose of ARC is to be flexible and to accelerate at the pace that makes sense for the student. So we would work with that student, and I think we're not tied to fixed timelines for that. That's part of the advantage of having these available online, is that students can move up or down throughout the school year or over the summer as needed. Similarly, there's a question about an application deadline for middle school students. I would say this is on a rolling basis. You know, we will work with students and parents and teachers, and if a student gets to a point in the middle of a quarter or the middle of a semester where they feel like they've demonstrated mastery of the level they're in and they're ready to try something new, then we're open to letting them try something new.
I see a couple questions I can answer here. One question is about whether the ARC extra courses, if taken during the high school year, allows kids to graduate early. We currently have a handful of students who request early graduation, and the important thing when we consider these requests is that we make sure that we're setting students up to be successful when they leave us. And so we really work individually with each student who has that desire to potentially leave high school after 3 years, make sure that they have the necessary graduation requirements. Usually English is one of the more challenging opportunities for students, because a student needs 4 years of English in order to get a high school diploma. But we typically consider the big picture, what that student's goals are. I do think this offers that potential opportunity, but we're still going to probably have to figure out what the impact virtual learning has on that process. And then the other question I see on here is about ARC options for Project Lead the Way courses. Again, with electives, I think you're gonna find probably some limitation in terms of what some courses are that will actually work within a virtual environment. And I would probably put PLTW courses in that group, where we probably would have a hard time fielding those courses. First of all, they usually tend to be courses that only have a small enrollment to begin with. So the thought that we would be able to have enough students to justify a section of Project Lead the Way courses is probably very small. And secondly, those courses do, I think, lend themselves more to an in-person environment, because they tend to be much more hands-on. And so there's a lot of courses like that at the high school, whether it be a shop class, whether it be a weight training class, if you're taking weight training, where having the resources in order to prove mastery over the content makes it a little more difficult to have those courses live virtually.
So a clarifying question, and we are going to release the video of this as well as the links to the forms that you need. So look for those in your principal e-notes that come out within the next week. But for what we have currently for ARC are those designed classes. And then if you are interested in the full synchronous program, whether that's for middle school or high school, you'll want to fill out that form so we can determine how to best meet your needs as a family. There's a question on here also about our expectations for fall of 21 and COVID just in general. you know, I feel like everything that we say is as of right now, this is what we're planning. I mean, there have been a lot of things over the course of the last year that we wouldn't have expected to turn out the way that they have. What we're hearing from the medical community right now, what we are aware of, is that we are expecting a regular school year to be in effect for next year, probably mitigating measures, but ultimately an experience that will look pretty similar to what students have had in a non-pandemic year. So that is where we are currently in our planning, but like everything, we are continuing to have backup options if that is actually not the case.
So a question here about taking band and then doing the rest of your work virtually. I don't know that we necessarily have an answer to this question. I know that has come up under COVID times, and we initially were open to that happening, and then we kind of stepped away from it because it definitely offers us some operational challenges when we have students coming and going a lot during the school day. So I don't know yet whether or not we would give this opportunity to students to take certain courses online. And again, it's probably impossible to answer that until we know what the actual interest level is, because in order for some of these other courses to actually have virtual versions, we're going to have enough students sign up for them.
There's a question here about whether math classes might be offered for high school students. So again, I would say driven by demand. If we see a high demand for particular high school math classes, then it certainly is an option. One of the reasons we didn't start there is that in using ARC as a true acceleration or flexibility program, math is one of those areas at the high school where we have a fairly rich stratification. We have a lot of different levels of math, from, you know, college prep, honors, AP, down to you know, our basic algebra classes. And so we didn't start there because we feel like our math placements at the high school are a little bit more flexible already than they are at middle school. But again, if the demand were there, then we would certainly look into it as an option.
There's a recent question, is it possibly an in-person student and still take an extra ARC course as in an 8th class? The answer is yes, but there would be the $200 fee for that for the semester to do that. But that's a way where if a student can handle it and they want to try and get ahead, they can.
A question about ARC instructors, you know, like traditional instructors, are they the point person? Like always, I would start with the class, the assigned teacher, and then from there we have those additional supports. As Dr. Riethmeyer said earlier, counselors will be there as a layer of support. Doug Barton, as our ARC coordinator, will be another layer of support. And in reality, your building principals as well will be another layer of support for students. There's a question, if we don't submit interest by March 31st, we are committed to 100% in person for next year. I wouldn't necessarily, here's what I would say. This is kind of I would like to say, no, you still have the opportunity to do virtual. The challenge we'll have with some of these is whether or not we actually make the class. So for instance, if we have a reduced number of people demonstrating interest and we say we're not going to have this class because there's not enough students to warrant having the additional structure in place or being able to create something, especially for the synchronous version, then we're really limited to being able to give families what they want. So it is very helpful for us if we know that families are interested, so we can create and ensure that we have those courses available. Once they're created, if you want to commit to them at a later time, obviously that's something we could work with you on.
So our extra course is $200. Yes, it's $200 per semester if you go above and beyond at the high school a 7-period day. So if you take 6 classes in person and then you do 1 via ARC, that's a total of 7. There is no cost for that. But if you take a 7-period day and do an additional course beyond that, which is an 8th course, then there is a charge of $200 for each semester that it's taken.
I can address the question about vaccines for next year. I mean, obviously, we are planning for a normal school year, and I think that's what we should be doing, and that's what we're hoping for. At the same time, I think we've all learned over the last 12 months that sometimes the best laid plans are not able to be put into fruition because circumstances change. So obviously, if we get to August of next year and things are not what everyone is optimistically planning for, then we will have to potentially change course again. That's not our hope, but we had to pull together virtual classes over the summer in the matter of a couple months and put together we had to redo our entire master schedule at the high school. And that is something that typically takes us from January until August to put together. And we had to do it very, very quickly. And so I trust that we can do that again. But we are all optimistic that things will be better by that point in time with the virus. But we'll be watching it closely and making changes and adjustments if necessary.
All right, and our final question is about ARC 2.0 classes and how they complement or impact middle school challenge courses other than math. And they're not designed to do that. So math is the one area where ARC 2.0 will have that layer of acceleration in a virtual program. Just want to follow up and say that, again, you'll see our contact information in the webinar if you want to go back and watch this recording later when it's shared. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if you've got some questions that are really specific to your child so that we can help to support you in determining what's best as you plan for whatever role virtual learning may have for your child going into the 21-22 school year. And it looks like we had one final question come in. If we fill out the form, are we then committed, or is it truly to show how many are interested? So to answer that question, you know, as we said earlier, there is a withdrawal period that happens within this process. So as students start the school year, then they will have the opportunity to withdraw within a certain period of time. So the same would be true if you put in that you want to be a part of this programming, that you feel like that your child needs this, then we'd like to know that. And then as we work with you on developing that actual schedule, if for some reason it does not work out for your child, we will work with you on that. So I don't, you know, obviously the commitment is this is something you really want, but I am also realistic that there are lots of things that could impact it when the schedule actually becomes finalized that could result in you changing your mind. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a good evening. We look forward to working with you as ARC 2.0 rolls out from here.